Hello. Welcome. It's the Christmas season, and that means holiday specials. Guess what? I'm no exception. But let's jump right into it. Have you seen this anime? No? Well, you're going to. But know that nothing I do can truly provide the experience that exists within this 30-minute piece of holiday weirdness. There's a free fan sub on YouTube. Go look up Orourane the Cat Player and watch it to get that full experience, because I'm about to bastardize and butcher the hell out of it. But then, there's more. So, those of you who do know about this anime, you probably believe that it's just a happy, goofy, and slightly drug-fueled film from 1992 about a young man down on his luck around Christmas time, encountering another man who is a cross between Santa and Gandalf, who plays cats, like an instrument. And for the anime, that's correct. But I say unto thee, that you have no idea what's truly behind this. I don't think I've seen a single English article or video discuss who wrote this aside from just the briefest mention of his name. And no, I don't mean screenplay writer Maori Sekijima, who does have quite a few famous anime under his belt. No, I mean this man, Baku Yumemakura. Now, I'm not terribly surprised if that name doesn't mean anything to you, but Yumemakura has an extensive bibliography and is well known in Japan, even having a Netflix anime based off of one of his novel series, on Myoji. But for us, there's only one thing that's ever been translated, and it's never been finished. Psycho Diver. Bloody, violent, and hypersexual, the translated series doesn't even reach the saga that the anime takes place in. Baku, hit up your boy. I want to be a publisher. I failed once. Let me try again. But you know how the people talk about those who have the happiest media that they've made are often assholes, and those who make the darkest are often nice? Like, Hayao Miyazaki is said to be an asshole, but Junji Ito is said to be a lovable goofball. Well, try to get a read on this guy then. Because in Psycho Diver, some of his protagonists, yes plural, take joy in some of the craziest interrogation methods. At one point, one of them force feeds a man a light bulb whole, intact, before uppercutting him, and then he gives him a bucket of water to dip his face in, and he demands that he talk. The book is very detailed about the damage, shards of glass, their location in the mouth, and just how hard it is to get them out. It is graphic, and there are many scenes like it. But also graphic, and I mean graphic, are the numerous sex scenes that occur every few pages. I'm not exaggerating. I need to go through and count just how many there are in book 1, which itself opens with a sex scene, followed by multiple murders committed by the still naked male character. But then you get to today's subject, Nekohiki no Orourane the Cat Player. A completely different vibe in itself. And I will say that the anime is very faithful to the first chapter. You see, after that, things begin to change. Nothing quite as dark as Psycho Diver, obviously, but there's just so much more. The anime covers probably the first 20 to 30 pages of the book, but then there are more stories, more characters, and each story is relatively self-contained. There's a mystical rare flower that blooms underneath the soil, a bug that gives you your heart's desire in a dream, a group of people who look for books in the trash and become fast friends / spirit hunters, and a monster that eats your dreams, and in doing so, parts of yourself. All of these stories are tied together by one thing, one man, Santa Gandalf, Orourane, and his cats. Oh, and I forgot to mention, his cats get drunk. They are legitimate alcoholics, seeking out alcohol wherever they can find it, whether it's in back alleys, finding wine bottles, spilled beer on the streets, or licking wine off of the pants of a man who spilt it there hours earlier. They are obsessed with drinking. But the main takeaway you need to have is knowing that the man who wrote this also wrote this. A small side note before we proceed with the main. On a dreary Saturday in December, I'm reading through the afterword, and this contains quite a bit of information. Maybe even could give us a bit of insight into Yumemakura and his character. After the release of Nekohiki no Orourane, originally, he began receiving letters from fans. He estimates more than 300 initially, and then they just continued. He replied to them for nearly 7 years. And eventually, though, with a busy schedule, he was no longer able to keep up. However, he says that he will still occasionally reply, but only if the letter arrives on paper. Now, keep in mind, that was penned in 1989, and Yumemakura is now 74 years of age. But where does this start? The first story of Orourane was released in 1977 in Kiso Tengai magazine, and the stories of Orourane continued until 1987, eventually being published as paperbacks by Cobalt. There are a decade of these stories. So, are there more? Well, I'm obviously going to have trouble chasing down Japanese magazines from over 40 years ago. However, in that afterward, Yumemakura mentioned another book. So I went to look, and yes, there is another one, which I could and did purchase. However, I'm lazy and I was running out of time on this video, and that book doesn't exactly pertain to our main story, which isn't fair as they're all self-contained, but it doesn't have the anime chapter in there. So, with that happening, while I did get it, if you'd like to hear more about the continued adventures of Orourane and his cats, drop a comment below and I'll consider making a part 2 after this one. We'll briefly cover the anime and then we'll get into the rest of the stories, but know that the pacing may seem a bit off, and that's the way it is in the book and in the anime. So just be warned. Full spoilers as well, and with all of that out of the way, fasten your seatbelts. We're taking off now. December 20th, in a small town in the mountains. An orchestra is disbanded, leaving a young cellist out of work. He got his last payment, but doesn't know what to do. So, he decides to do what any normal human would do when losing their job. Get drunk. With this conclusion, he tosses a coin in the air and then promptly drops it. It rolls into an alleyway where he meets a small cat, perhaps Siamese in appearance, and also the discovery that his last coin has rolled into a wine bottle. While tapping the bottle, trying to get the coin out, he sees that a cat is sitting underneath, drinking the drops that come out. It then walks over, grabs a wine bottle with its paws, and stands up and pours the contents into its mouth. Now, the cat is Siamese in the anime. However, in the book, this cat is always described as a black cat with a green-bluish hue to its fur. The cellist is astounded watching this spectacle, and when the cat is done, it drunkenly saunters over to him and rubs up against him. And then there, ahead of the pair, is an old man who greets the cellist as the coin neatly rolls out of the bottle he is holding. Two other cats appear from within the coat of the old man, giving their own meowed greeting. These are Chauffrin and Mileto. The cat that the cellist encountered is Illunato. The old man, the cellist, and the cats move elsewhere for a conversation, though in the book the conversation takes place in the alleyway, and it's pretty much the same. The old man explains that Illunato is shy and does not often let people touch him. He must have thought the cellist was friendly. This is absolutely a lie in all senses, though I want you to know why. Throughout the rest of the stories, you will find that Illunato is the boldest and most brash of all three cats and often runs off all the time to make new friends and drink. Except in one story, you'll find that it's actually Chauffrin. The cellist says that maybe Illunato thought that he would make a good drinking buddy, as he was off to go get booze on his own. But he's never seen a cat drink before. With a chuckle, the old man says that he taught him to enjoy alcohol. It gets a good tune out of him. The cellist questions what this means, but the old man says that he feels like teasing him and asks if he's free on the 23rd. In the book, it's Christmas Eve, but no matter. With the cellist having nothing else to do, the old man suggests that he come to a bar called Yosakoi Neko. The old man introduces himself as Orourane, and as in the book, the cellist does not introduce himself at all. He just watches as the old man turns and goes into his hotel. Now, I'd like to elaborate on Orourane teaching the cats to drink. We don't get this elaboration in the anime, but in the book, He explains that he started by diluting liquor with tea, and then he would dab a little bit on the nose of the cat. The cat would then give it a little lick to get it off, and then he dabs a little bit more, and the process repeats. Eventually, the cat ends up a bit tipsy, and day by day, he makes it just a little bit stronger. Before long, you get a fellow like Illuminato. His words, not mine. So, on the 23rd, the cellist is inside Yosakoi Neko, and it's already quite packed. He's having a cocktail at the bar, and right after he orders his third, a man in a bow tie shows up on the stage, thanking everyone for their patronage and saying that he has a special show for them as a token of their appreciation. Orourane steps out with the cats and takes a seat on stage. A little touch here and there, and then he begins to play. Okay, all jokes aside, go watch this scene unadulterated and later go watch the other musical scene. If you left and you're back, that's wild, isn't it? Also, I made, I think, 8 different versions of this joke, so if you want them, just let me know and I'll post them later. In the anime, it's an original composition of some sort, but in the book, it's White Christmas, followed by some jazzy medleys. Another thing we have in the book is a description of how the cats are actually played. A pinch of the ear, a tug of the tail, a tap on the belly, or a gentle stroke along the flank. Each action gets a different reaction, and all the while, he'll pet the throat of the cat in order to command a longer or shorter note. When all is over, there's thunderous applause. Later, the cellist goes to see Orourane in his room. While the old man eats, the cellist excitedly exclaims about how great the performance was, and the old man is just focused on telling his story. We'll blend a bit of the book monologue with the anime here. In the mountains, the winters are terribly fierce, and the mountains themselves can come right to your doorstep. You can hear the mononoke. They may be auditory or visual, but they're mononoke all the same. You can hear the spirits laugh, maybe someone calling you. You'll check outside your door, and, of course, there's no one. They live on the bubbles that rise from people's hearts, often the lonely, and it does get lonely up there. Cats are sharper than humans in this respect. They can sense the mononoke before you do. And while he's dealt with this for years, the cats do keep him great company. Orourane felt a calling to come down to the town, and today was his debut performance. Never mind all that sentimental crap, though. The cellist wants to know if Orourane could play other animals. An elephant, a horse, a whole animal orchestra? But Orourane instead asks the cellist if he would like to join in playing with him. And he asks for the cat's permission as well. And they agree. He instructs the young man that if he wants to learn it in a single night, learn to be honest. If you're hungry, say you're hungry. If you want a woman, say you want a woman. If you don't understand, say you don't understand. Humans and cats both cry out, and that's all there is to it. That night, the cellist stays up all night learning to play the cats, but something is missing. He can't quite get that sound right. By the end, Illuminato is the only one still up, and the cellist apologizes to the cat, saying that he'll reward him with a good breakfast. We'll skip the next part, because it is literally just the cellist walking out into the snow with Illuminato, looking at all the people, Orourane showing up and saying, "Have a good, pure heart." And the whole scene doesn't exist in the book. The next night, people are lined up to see the performance. And the cellist is, of course, nervous, because he never got that sound he was looking for. But Orourane only stares, urging him to go on. To his surprise, Illuminato instantly begins to sing beautifully. The sounds grow and grow, and the crowd is moved. Then comes the part where Orourane joins in, and the other two cats, Maleto and Chauffeurin, well, they go do their thing as well. In the book, the crowd goes insane. Everyone is finding a way to join in, singing, dancing, clapping, stomping, tapping their feet, banging on tables. It's insane. In the anime, well, this is another one where you need to go see the musical number just to understand. After all of this, Orourane is accosted by a young man, a drunk violinist who claims that the old man stole his job. He plays at Yosakoi Neko on Christmas every year. Not only that, he was part of the orchestra that the cellist was a part of. The next day, Orourane is gone. He leaves a letter explaining that he never wanted to hurt anyone. It was just a bit of playfulness. The anime ends with the main character going back to his hometown via train and seeing Orourane out in a field that he passes by. However, in the book, Orourane does not leave the letter. Instead, on New Year's Eve, the cellist has made up his mind to return to his hometown. But he's going to a tavern to have dinner first after having cleared out his apartment. When he enters, Ilunato rushes up to him, and of course, this means Orourane is there as well. The two sit together, and he explains much like he does in the letter in the anime. However, he actually does give a moment to give a goodbye and say that he's heading back to the mountains now. The last thing the cellist ever hears from the old man is a remark about how the snow is piling up. And then, he's gone. Not a single trace of footsteps in the snow. Okay, really, just go watch the anime. Do it now, do it later. Come back, preferably. It's the next set of stories that's going to be pretty interesting. Tenzin Furinso. It's autumn. Leaves fall and flowers sway in the wind. A young man walks through the plains and up into the mountains, observing the Matsumushiso, a flower whose presence announces the end of summer. And with summer gone, the young man wonders to himself if he left anything undone, anything forgotten, letters unsent or half-written. There has to be something. What was it? What had he forgotten? He brought a little wine with him in his pack, reminded of this by the sloshing. He's headed for a lodge that's not far from here, thinking of a girl he knows will be there, Tsugumi. A few years ago, when he found the lodge, he begged the owner to let him stay and work there, but he wasn't the only one. Tsugumi, a man named Arakawa, and the young man we follow now, Kinabara Sohei, all asked the owner of the Namatoko Lodge, Onita, for the same request, and they were granted this. He could have taken a regular route, but seeking solitude, he found himself deliberately choosing one where he believed he would see no one else. But this also meant that the terrain was not as friendly, and before long, with this, and in addition to his worn-out shoes, he slips and falls. No matter. He picks himself up and dusts himself off, but a short moment later he's alerted by the sound of a cat. Ilunato, of course. Surprised by this, he remains in place as the cat begins to circle around him and eventually planting itself behind him, gazing up at his pack. Confused, he sets the pack down, and that's when the smell hits him. The smell of wine. The bottle in his pack had cracked when he fell. When he pulls it out, the top half of the bottle snaps right off and begins to spill quite a bit of wine onto the ground. To his astonishment, the cat begins to lick at the wine, and shortly after, the sound of an old man calling for the cat is heard. Of course, it is none other than Orourane, looking like an out-of-season Santa. The other two cats, Maleto and Chauffeurin, emerge from his pockets quickly and come to partake of the wine as well. Orourane apologizes for the ill manners of his cats who are ignoring his scolding, and the typical question comes up. Why do they drink? Well, Orourane taught them, and he didn't expect them to become such heavy drinkers. The young man, Sohei, asks if he should just spill the rest for the cats. Obviously the bottle is dangerous, but Orourane instead asks if he can have the wine. When Sohei agrees, the old man pulls out a wineskin and pours what remains from the broken bottle into a pouch with ease without spilling a single drop, and then he wraps the broken bottle in newspaper and slips it into a plastic bag. Then, Orourane poses a question, saying, It's not much of a thank you, but would the young man like to listen to a flower? Obviously intrigued by this proposal, he agrees. The old man calls it the tenin furinso, roughly translated the wild bell. He explains that it's a sort of natural wind chime. With Sohei's curiosity piqued, they depart, and Chauffrin scrambles up the pants of the young man and plants himself on the shoulder, just like a parrot, before giving him a small lick on the cheek. The pair walk through a meadow for about 10 minutes before Orourane stops and points to the grass at his feet. A curious green stem is there with 2 small leaves that cup together partly. It rises and then descends smoothly into the earth. The pair lay down flat on the grass and turn their ears to the ground, and then they hear it. First, it's just the deep rumble of a mountain, but then it's followed by the faintest chime, like a wind chime made of thin crystal. With gleaming eyes, Orourane whispers that when the wind blows, the movement travels down the stem and into the soil, and that makes the flower ring. After a while, the two sit up at the same time and sit in the grass together, Chauffrin curling into a ball in the lap of Sohei, while Orourane begins to explain. At the end of the stem, underneath the soil, there's a bulb about the size of an egg, and inside that, the flower blooms. Probably. When questioned on what he means by probably and if he's ever seen the flower, Orourane says no and continues to explain further. Once the flower withers, you can never hear it again. Somewhere in China or India, there are said to be a few left, but the only single plant he knows of is right here. Long ago, they say India had more of them, but in the age of King Asoka, people supposedly dug them up and burned them all at his command. They were scarce to begin with, but a few survivors made it across the Silk Road and arrived in Japan. With a faint smile, he says, "It's just fine not knowing what it looks like, right? What kind of blossom rings with such a sound hidden under the ground? If you saw it, you might be disappointed. The only ones who truly know the flower are the bees. They can hear that sound, and they find it digging into the soil, and then they make a tiny hole in the bulb. They slip inside, and they pollinate the blossom. After that, the chime falls silent. The pair are lucky to have heard it at all, because most of the time the whole thing lasts at most about half a day. After their conversation, the two part, and Sohei makes his way up to the lodge, but that sound of the flower still lingers in his ears. He approaches the lodge and ascends the steps, and as he opens the door, there is Tsugumi to greet him with a smile and ask about the trip. He briefly informs her about his encounter with the strange old man before being greeted by the other face that should be there, Arakawa. This man is a photographer who typically comes to photograph flowers, but now he wants to get into photographing models, and Tsugumi is his first prospect. She teases him a bit, and then we get a bit of history between Tsugumi and Sohei. The young man had grown to have feelings for her over their previous time at the lodge, but her heart was elsewhere. When he finally confessed to her, she revealed that she had feelings for another, Onita, the owner. The pair now sit drinking tea as Sohei does his best to not fully reveal the truth when she asks why he's been away so long, simply dismissing it as he had a lot going on. She then asks for more information on the old man that Sohei encountered on his way here, and he recounts the story, pleasantly thinking of Orourane the cat in his lap. The next day, they embark to go find that flower in the field, as Tsugumi wants to see it, but no matter where they look, they can't seem to find it, until Tsugumi points out a small patch of dirt. Something had been taken from that spot. The flower had been dug up. The only one who comes to mind is Arakawa, but when they get back, he unenthusiastically denies this, and that's where the conversation ends. However, later when Arakawa is going to take a bath, Tsugumi is laying out his futon and she finds something in a newspaper bundle which already had soil spilled out from it on the ground. She quickly takes it to Sohei, and inside is the flower, completely drained of life. Their meeting turns out to be not so secret, as Arakawa appears, saying that after hearing their story, he had to find it, he had to take pictures of it, but he realized it wasn't ordinary. He knows what he did was wrong, but he just couldn't stop himself. What if someone else found it? He wants to submit an article to a flower magazine through a friend, or at least so he says. Arakawa shakes the bulb of the flower and it gently rattles. Sohei can only think of the face of Orourane, his smile washed away and on the verge of tears. He can't help but feel like he betrayed the old man. He gently grasps Arakawa's hand, which is still holding the bulb of the flower, and begs him to return it to where it belongs. But in a moment he describes as unlike him, but undeniably him, he squeezes a bit too hard, and the bulb cracks. The room is washed in a sweet scent as powder erupts from the orb. The flower falls apart, and Arakawa begins to scream at Sohei, demanding to know what he's doing. He ruined his flower. But something's not right. Arakawa isn't himself, but Sohei isn't either. He slams his fist down on the table, demanding Arakawa be silent, and it makes him feel good. He turns to Tsugumi, but something else is wrong. She's naked. She's also fearful of him. He edges toward her, and she yells at him not to come any closer. He's a lizard. But Sohei ignores her pleas, demanding to know why she's avoiding him. He turns back to Arakawa, and in his vision there, he sees the photographer begin to change. Animal hair sprouting all over his face, his nose and cheeks contorting, canine teeth slowly growing and pushing out of his mouth, drool leaking from it. Sohei ignores this as a violence begins to overtake him. Desire. He turns back to Tsugumi, and then he begins to grab her and shake her, yelling that she understands his feelings, right? She can feel them, can't she? He holds her. He squeezes her. And then there's a crash as Arakawa throws a coffee cup on the floor. This snaps Sohei out of his obsession with Tsugumi. But now he's aware of something else. There are faces in the window, warped and distorted, with wide eyes and twisted smiles. Animal faces and human faces alike, all staring right into the room at all of them. A crescendo of insanity begins to build. And then the door opens. It's old, gentle Orourane saying, "Oh my, what a state you've fallen into." He then lifts Illuminato into his arms, and the cat begins to sing. The cloud of darkness over the room begins to melt away, and while Orourane continues to play Illuminato in his arms, he opens the windows. With that simple action, the faces disappear. Everyone except the old man and the cat begin to lose all of their energy and sink to the floor. Sohei, barely clinging to consciousness, tries to apologize, but the old man with a gentle smile says it's he who should apologize, teaching him something so foolish and putting him through such an ordeal. He's sorry. Now Sohei should understand why they burned these flowers in India. Inhaling the pollen loosens dark creatures in the hearts and allows them to rise. Orourane says he should have warned Sohei properly, but he didn't imagine things would turn out like this. It just ended up calling all of the bad energies and the ill humors of the mountains straight to them. But he and Illuminato made it in time, so rest easy, because by morning they should forget everything that happened tonight. Chauffeurin hops into the arms of Sohei, and Orourane tells the cat to give the young man a proper farewell. Chauffeurin licks his cheek, and then Sohei's eyes close. In the morning, Sohei wakes on the floor with a blanket laid over him, and he sees that the same was done for Tsugumi and Arakawa. The flower is gone, and there's no sign of last night's struggle. He gazes at Tsugumi's sleeping face for a moment, before gently brushing his lips against hers, and then he leaves. The Kokoro Hoshi Ladybug. In this story, we do not have a name for our main character, so we'll just call him Young Man. Throughout these stories, this is a trend for Yumemakura. The story opens with a young man walking through a field of rapeseed blossoms, reciting the lines to a famous poem by Yamamura Bocho. As he stands among the field of flowers, he's enveloped in the presence of the bright yellow blossoms. He kneels down in the field so that the flowers rise to his waist, and he observes the landscape and the flurry of ladybugs all around. Next to him is his camera bag, and he reminisces about bringing his girlfriend, Yuko to this place and photographing the landscape. She should have come with him this time, but she is somewhere else. Just then, a strange sensation brushes the waistband of his jeans, and when he looks down, he sees a cat has begun licking at the fabric on his pants. Then a voice calls out. It is of course that of Orourane calling for Illunato. Always the bold one and always the troublemaker. The old man murmurs excuse me's and pardon me's, but not to the young man. These are issued to the flowers as he gently parts and passes through them. As he approaches, the two other cats appear from his coat and rush to lick the pants of the young man. Orourane assesses the issue quite quickly, asking if the young man spilled wine on his pants, which he affirms. A gentle, warming smile spreads across the old Orourane's face, and then he quickly begins to clap his hands as he chastises the cats for their greediness, telling them that's quite enough, also telling Illunato to give the young man a proper greeting, which the cat does, giving a quick lick to the cheek. Orourane gives an apology, explaining that he must have taken a spill, and Illunato wandered off during that time. No matter. He'll wander a bit further away now and leave the young man in peace. He did not mean to intrude. And so, he does. Before long, Orourane and the cats disappear from sight. The young man works as a photographer, a university dropout, freshly turned 22 this year. Unfortunately, being a photographer is difficult. It's hardly a rare profession. The city is overflowing with them, but nonetheless, he does manage to find work. 2.5 years ago, while doing a magazine cover shoot, he met a girl named Yuko, and no, she wasn't the model, she was the stylist. Slowly, though, a distance grew between the pair. They saw each other less and less frequently, and then the night before this trip, the trip to the rapeseed fields, a trip which was planned for them both to go on together. He saw her for the first time in months, but this would be the last time as well. They went to a French restaurant, upscale, luxurious, and little out of place for a photographer in jeans going there immediately after work. Of course, things were off. Yuko barely touched her food, and the pair barely conversed. And then she lowered her eyes and simply said, "I'm sorry." Puzzled by this, the young man pressed for more, and she explains that she won't be able to go with him the next day. He keeps pressing, but a long silence follows, eventually broken by him asking if she stopped loving him. Yuko shakes her head, and the young man, surprising himself, gets quite a bit louder, asking if there's someone else she loves. She looks up tearfully, and while their eyes are locked together, the young man reaches for his wine, knocking it onto his pants. Undeterred, he picks up the glass and asks who he is, though he has a fair idea. He just wants to hear it from her. When she hesitates, he names the man himself, and she confirms, only saying that he asked her to come help with his work. This is followed by awkward, meandering conversations that we, the readers, are not privy to, and 30 minutes later, they exit the restaurant, and he asks to hold her one last time, but she denies, saying that it wouldn't end. Then she turns her back and walks away. The young man yells after her that he will be going tomorrow, even if he has to go alone. And as though expecting something to change, he remains rooted in place for another 10 or 15 minutes, maybe longer, only leaving because he needs to relieve himself. Back to the present, he stands in the fields with his camera, but everything is tangled in his mind. It feels empty. There feels like there's no purpose to taking pictures. His eyes roam, looking for something he knows will not be there. Yuko. A ladybug flutters past his vision and lands on his arm. It begins to gently climb up, and he decides to pay it no mind as his eyes return to scanning the horizon again. But he does see someone. A woman. It couldn't be. But then the figure begins to wave and call out his name. It is Yuko. She begins to run to the young man, eventually colliding with him and clinging to him, apologizing, crying, saying she didn't know how precious he was to her. Giving in to primal urges, he kisses her, and the two fall into the blossoms, alone in this beautiful moment. There's something bitter on her lips, but the young man yearns for more. And then he closes his eyes and darkness envelops him. There's a melody, a sound, something gently caressing him, a physical touch rousing him from his slumber, accompanying that sound, but he doesn't wish to leave. However, that bitterness from the kiss still lingers in his mouth, and there's something else. What is that touch? It's the touch of a cat's tongue on his face. With that realization, he opens his eyes, and there is Ilanedo licking him, and above that is old man Orourane playing muletto and chauffeurin. The old man greets him, seeing that he's now awake, but the young man still has that bitterness in his mouth. He spits, and it was a rapeseed blossom that he had been chewing on in his sleep. He asks what happened, and Orourane explains that it's nothing serious, pulling out a vial to show the young man. Inside is a single ladybug, a Kokoro Hoshi, long ago named such by a woman in one of the stories of the Tsutsumi Shunagon Monogatari. It's a collection of short stories from the 11th century. When startled, the little ladybug will burrow into a person, and if they hold a desire in their heart, it becomes true, but it's only within a dream. It is as the woman in the tale named it, the ladybug of the heart's desire. But in truth, it only resembles a ladybug. It's actually a kind of yosei. In this context, it may translate to the popularization it has become, a fairy. They like to take on the form of spring insects, and perhaps one in every 8,000 ladybugs is actually one of these. They can be other things, even butterflies, and further legends say that if one slips inside of a person and the body of that who they long for, then their love will come true. But Orourane can't say if that's true or not. As if tempting the young man to try it again, he removes the ladybug from the vial and places it on his fingertip, offering it to the young man, who only asks, "Is it safe?" To which Orourane replies, "As long as you keep your heart steady." He places it on the palm of the young man, and the insect slips inside quietly and begins to make its way up his arm. Instantly, the warmth of embracing Yuko returns to him, and he begins to close his eyes, but Orourane snaps him back too, telling him to steady himself. With that, Orourane turns to go, but the young man asks how to get the bug out, and Orourane tells him that when he's done, just point at the sun. It doesn't matter what hand. And with that, he departs, leaving the young man alone in the field. When Orourane has finally disappeared, the young man does as he was told and raises his right hand. From his fingertip, the ladybug emerges and flies into the sunlight, vanishing. He's unsure what the whole experience was about, but something has definitely changed within him. He concludes that whatever path he follows, the way that feels most natural is to just keep taking pictures. And so he'll do that. The Year-End Tipsy Detective Club. Here we will jump ahead a little bit to naming, because it's not for a little while that we receive a name for our character. And at that, we don't receive a real one. He's just named Manga Youth. But with that established, we will pick up with Manga Youth now explaining that his year has not been good. A friend took his own life. His girlfriend of several years broke up with him. He crushed his finger in an accident at his part-time job. An illustration job that he had been offered fell through, and before any of those wounds healed, his ex was already living with another man. Following this, in a drunken state, he ended up being beaten by a yakuza, receiving a hospitalizing head injury. And through it all, there was only one constant: poverty. 26 and down on his luck, our story begins. The Manga Youth has always, as his name suggests, loved manga in all forms. Shonen, shoujo, seinen, he'll take whatever he can get his hands on just to look at his beloved illustrations. However, having hardly any money, he feeds his obsession by digging through trash bins at train stations. Typically it's just a serialized magazine, but occasionally he's lucky enough to find a full-blown tankobon or complete volume of one series. Sometimes the new magazines on the stands at the kiosk can easily be found on top of a trash pile, and the thrill of that discovery is something that can only be experienced. Occasionally there is spit or phlegm or trash juice of one form or another on the cover, and when that's the case, he simply tears off the cover. This allows him to read whatever he wants with little concern for the judgment of others, even the occasional more adult magazine. As a hobby, it costs nothing, and he can make a bit on the side selling to scrap collectors. Getting out of his part-time job at 4, he can arrive at the station before 5, and that seems to be a golden time for his treasure hunting. There are, shall we say, other professionals of this nature, though, and they generally have their own territories and tastes. However, should two approach the same bin, the general rule is that the more shameless of the two will win. You see, there's a bit of tact to the art of picking magazines out of the trash. You don't just plunge in head first. No. The typical style is to lightly eye the contents without being too suspicious, and then reach in quickly and precisely snatch what you want. Now, obviously, this isn't always possible, and not everyone abides by this, but it is the general way of doing things. Of the other scavengers, though, there are a few regulars that the manga youth sees. One is a middle-aged wrestling fan who only cares about, well, wrestling magazines and sports magazines containing wrestling news, loudly announcing and asking as he plucks his prize from the depths, "Did so-and-so win last night?" Usually his preferred wrestler, or sometimes he'll go on about how there's no way X or Y move worked on such and such. About 37 or 38, he's an interesting fellow. Then there is the Baron, estimated to be in his mid-40s, a sharply dressed man in a black suit and coat with a mustache neatly combed with pomaded hair, topping off this nobility with gold-rimmed glasses. No one really knows what his preferred pick is. It seems it changes day by day. However, it is clear that when he observes the trash cans, he knows on that day what he wants. But if whatever he's looking for on that day is not there, he will simply board the train empty-handed. People tend to steer clear of him. But then there is our last to be mentioned. As we discussed before, sometimes two will approach the same target. And one day, the manga youth happened to encounter this exact situation with a girl wearing the uniform of a university student. She locked eyes with him, and they both happened to go for the same book, which she snatched away from him. And it was she who gave him that little piece of advice that it is the one who is the most shameless who will walk away with the prize. He was quite smitten with her for a moment, but they haven't approached each other since. One day, things abruptly changed. There were no trash prizes to be found, no treasure, not for anyone. It was as though each day the bins were utterly cleaned. Was someone snatching away this small pleasure of this group? December 23rd. The manga youth observed the Baron in contemplation standing over one of the bins, arms folded and deep in thought. Seeing this, the manga youth was drawn to him until eventually standing right next to him, and for the first time, he heard the Baron speak. "Something's wrong." Without thinking, the manga youth responded, "It's strange, isn't it? There's nothing here lately." The Baron agrees. There is absolutely something wrong, but neither knows what it could be. Unexpectedly, the middle-aged wrestling fan approaches, voicing his concerns about the missing wrestling magazines. The three conclude to hold a sort of council. They can miss a couple of trains. They decide to go to the nearby soba stand and think it over while enjoying some noodles, a treat on the Baron's dime, and his idea after all. They all seem to place the same order: no egg, no tempura, and each heaping sliced green onions onto their noodles. As they eat, they still can't seem to make any decision on what's happening to their magazines. Obviously, someone is taking them, but it's not any of the regulars. They're gone before any of the others get there. Who could this ruthless newcomer be? The three finish their meals and step away. The manga youth proposes that they investigate. He's off by midday on the 24th, as it's a Saturday, so he can keep watch starting around 4. The Baron protests, saying, "But my boy, that's Christmas Eve. The culprit might not even show up at all." But the manga youth says he has nothing better to do. And here the Baron names him, saying he can't have the manga youth doing all the work while he idles by. Of course, the young man questions this new name bestowed upon him, and the Baron exclaims that it's all he's ever seen the young man go for. So, it's dropped at that. The wrestling fan says that he will join in too. The group is now bolstered with resolve for their new plan, and a small voice comes from behind asking if it could join too. It's the university girl who snatched the book away from the manga youth. She says that she thinks she's seen who it is, a rather tall and thin old man with a cat. She looks around at the group, her eyes settling on Manga Youth, and she gives him a quick smile, which makes his heart flutter. December 24th, about 10 minutes after 4, Manga Youth and the university girl are standing on the platform. He had now named her Yukino-chan of the Shonen Shoujo manga. Each person went by their respective title in the group: Manga Youth, Baron, Pro Wrestler, and Yukino-chan of the Shonen Shoujo manga. We'll just call her Yukino. The Baron approaches and asks if the pair are already acquainted, and the Manga Youth briefly explains their first encounter. But the girl says that's not exactly how it was. The book in the trash was actually hers, and she had thrown it away by mistake. Inside, she had a flower pressed into the pages that was very special to her. She relays to the group her observations of the old man, that he would come and collect all the magazines in a brown paper bag. While she was watching him, a little cat poked its head out of the old man's coat. While they lingered, awaiting their target, she asks what the Manga Youth has thought of her up until now. He must have thought she was a strange girl, just digging in trash bins for men's manga magazines. Oh, here comes that weird girl again, he must have thought. She's caught him glancing at her, and in truth, she was embarrassed and was really hoping that one day she could explain it all to him. Yesterday, that was her real purpose, to have the opportunity to explain it to him, but when she overheard their conversation, well, here they are now. If she didn't talk to him then, she never would have worked up the courage, and she's already embarrassed about picking books out of the bins. But Manga Youth tells her that she's got it all wrong. He was the one who was embarrassed. It's not much longer before the group catches sight of the old man, and they end up following him to Shinjuku Station, where they happen to lose sight of him. By this time, he had quite a collection of magazines, and no matter how many, he seemed to just walk with a light, bouncy step. They only lost sight of him because they had to settle their fares for the rides, and the old man was already ahead of them and out the ticket gate. By the time they got outside themselves, there was no trace of him. Disheartened and surrounded by people of all ages swarming under the glow of the Christmas lights and decorations, they questioned why they were even here at such an hour. Was all this futile? Why were they chasing an old man? Did everyone really not have anyone else to spend Christmas Eve with? Their prior lively moods seemed to slowly sink, their bravado taken away. And then Yukino asks, why don't they have some beer? With that, she runs off to get some canned beer. For the Manga Youth, he thinks to himself that it could have been anything, just something else other than nothing, a movie, a parfait, or just something for the group to take their minds off of it all. But before long, they now find themselves wandering the streets, pleasantly tipsy with their beers in their hands. His mind must have drifted being in the presence of such a girl, her shoulder lightly brushing his. Suddenly, the Manga Youth collides shoulder to shoulder with a passerby, and he drops his beer. What little remained spilled at his feet as the can rolled across the sidewalk, and then suddenly, in his vision, a cat appears and begins to lick the puddle. It's the same cat that peeked out of the old man's coat. Then, from somewhere close by, they hear a voice calling, "Half price, cheaper than anywhere else." The Manga Youth picks up his can and begins to head towards the voice, the cat following him. And there is the old man sitting on the ground with the newspaper spread before him, and on it are all the books and magazines that he had been collecting. First, the old man notices his cat winding around the legs of the Manga Youth, and then he looks up and understands. Ah, so the cat had been treated to a drink by strangers, of course. It was, after all, the boldest of the bunch, Illuminato. He chastised the cat, saying it mustn't be drinking that filthy stuff with his cold still clearing up. Gazing at the ground, he asks if they've met somewhere before, and the Baron shakes his head, introducing the group. He then proceeds to explain everything that led them here, and to him. Orourane introduces himself and apologizes, saying that was terribly rude of him. He happens to be staying with a friend in the city, but Illuminato caught a cold and he wasn't going to put the bill on his friend. A fine wine would do for a remedy, but it's a bit expensive. So, while he does perform at a bar every night, unfortunately he doesn't get paid until the end of the month. So he took to gathering and selling books and magazines. Again, he offers his apologies. but the Baron insists that it's they who should apologize, and now he feels embarrassed. However, the manga youth is intrigued by this mention of performance, and Orourane, of course to the confusion of everyone else, explains that he plays the cats. Their voices loosen up a bit after some drink, and he offers a demonstration. As he begins to play, the expected happens. A crowd forms, cars and passerbys stop. Everyone has to watch and listen to this amazing performance. It's a Christmas song, but a bit jazzy as it's described. With the crowd beginning to clap and people dancing, the first snow of winter begins to fall from the sky. That night, the group goes to the bar to see the rest of the performance, and, as expected, it draws a crowd that does not understand how to process what they are seeing or hearing, except to just enjoy it. Everyone is having a drink and enjoying the show. Manga youth and Yukino grow closer and closer throughout the performance. Orourane plays popular Japanese tunes and even begins to take requests. Somewhere in the crowd, someone yells for Led Zeppelin and even Let It Be by the Beatles. People gather in the street outside the door, crowding for a chance to observe this performance as the snow continues to fall. The old man has a talent for seamlessly switching between songs, as if creating a medley, one by one, navigating through the requests that have been shouted, and even at one point playing Let It Be, which was shouted by Yukino and Manga Youth together. As it comes to a close, it takes quite some time for the roar of applause to die down. But when it does, everyone present is left with a pleasant exhaustion. Our group makes their way out into a nearby cafe where they have some coffee and discuss how much they enjoyed the performance. But shortly after that, they depart for the streets once more. Christmas Eve, and it seems no one wants to be alone, so no one really has the courage to say goodbye. The group just wander the streets, but then Yukino stops abruptly and the group turns to see why she's no longer with them. She's peering into an alleyway and pointing inside. There's a flower, or what looks like a flower. The shape resembles a violet, but it's pure white, rising straight out of the snow. Maybe ordinarily none of them would have noticed, and maybe this is just the effect that Orourane has on the hearts and minds of people, but here it is, a small joy for the group on Christmas Eve. Then that familiar cat's cry, and here comes Illuminato, followed by Orourane himself. They thank him for the earlier performance, but the old man just shyly scratches his head and smiles. But then he notices what the group is gathered around, and he names it for them. It is the Yuki Agusa, roughly translating to snow arrow grass. It's the kind of thing that someone encounters only once in a lifetime if they're lucky. It's not exactly a flower, it's something like a mononoke. It doesn't always take the shape of a flower, it just happens to have taken that form this time. Where does the snow come from? The sky? The clouds? And how do the clouds come into being? Well, warm, humid air rises into the sky, and that cools it. With that, energy, ki, if you will, is carried along in all of this, and sometimes it becomes trapped in the clouds. Or the clouds could just be made out of it. Energy made visible. Sometimes it's released outward, as lightning or something of the sort. Well, just because the clouds are settled energy does not mean that everything in them is settled. Sometimes some remains restless, and they carry that unrest with them as they become droplets of water, vapor, or ice. These restless energies inevitably meet others of their kind, and they cling together. This can happen easily in the cloud, and when it does happen, they form a kind of seed. It grows and absorbs the surrounding ki when it lands, feeding on it, and they can make strange and unknowable shapes. But in this case, it took the form of a violet. There was probably a seed of a violet that the restless ki found, and it carried out the life of that seed. It's quite rare, and in the right circumstance, it could even take on the shape of a tree or even a human. All of this the old man explains with a gentle smile. However, there is a darker side to this. When those energies bloom so magnificently, things that would like to eat them will find them. Just as the manga youth is prompting the old man for more, Illuminato slips from his arms and goes to lick the blossom, and it begins to shrink until it is no longer there at all. Orourane exclaims that that's not very good, but he's disappointed but not terribly surprised. Then he explains to the group that the Yuki Yagusa can only be sustained at a constant temperature. It's made out of ice after all. When something warm like a cat's tongue is introduced, the balance of ki collapses. Factors such as these make this entire experience so rare. Shortly after this, strange incidents began to adorn the pages of the newspapers. That Christmas Eve, a taxi driver was involved in an accident in Shinjuku. Something like a reindeer with glowing red eyes jumped in front of his car, and he careened into a guardrail. The following day, another article appears. A housewife was walking home late at night and was chased by a pale, naked little girl. Another story, a university student and a telephone on-call professional were staying at a hotel and drinking wine. Something tapped at their window, and when they checked, a pure white naked child was clinging to the glass on the 31st floor. Interestingly enough, that university student was none other than Yukino, and the on-call professional was the manga youth. The two later discussed the recent events, and it was too coincidental. They wanted to figure this out, and having the numbers of Pro Wrestler and Baron, they decided to band together once more. When they arrived at the alleyway of the Yuki Yagusa, Pro Wrestler and Baron were already there. The fact that they had all come together so easily felt like it must mean that that night really lingered in their heart, like a dream you just can't shake. But of course, with there being the four of them, what happened was truly real. Besides that, Orourane had left them with some parting words on that Christmas Eve, telling them that on the 31st, he may need some extra hands in catching a creature. When pressed further on this, he only explains that if they hear reports of people seeing ghosts over the next few days and they want to help, meet him here on the 31st. But the manga youth believes that even without those words, they would have come here again. While waiting for the old man and questioning if he really will come, Yukino is the first to spot it. She calls out to the rest that it's a flower. Where the Yuki Yagusa had been, there is something else now. A black stem rising from the ground, thick and bare of leaves. At the tip, a bud that is a lurid red hung upside down. To the perception of the manga youth, it moved and opened, and inside was an eye that slowly and deliberately fixed upon him. At that moment, a naked child sprung up out of nowhere and began to climb the walls of the alleyway. Yukino saw it too. Demanding to know what that was, she clings to the manga youth's arm. At that moment, Orourane appears as if to answer all their questions. That was the creature he said they ought to help him catch. Everyone seems to have seen something different, and each believes that the creature looked at them. For Yukino and Manga, it was a child, but for Baron it was a monkey, and for Pro Wrestler, it was a snake. Orourane explains that it appears as what they think. They all saw the flower because Yukino was the first to spot it, and announced it as such. For the rest, it is what had been on their mind. The taxi driver saw a reindeer because he had been listening to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on the radio. The housewife saw a little girl because she was probably in a hurry to get back to her own daughter. And Yukino and Manga saw the child because they were thinking about the recent news articles. But what is it really? Well, if you go back far enough, it was once the Yuki Yagusa. Normally it would just melt and the energies would return to the sky under the influence of the sun. However, due to the collapse that it had experienced, the restless energies are now trapped and cannot return to the heavens, so they will need to help them return. Otherwise, it will linger and bloom where it shouldn't, wandering aimlessly, and as it does so, the nature of it changes, becoming something like what they just saw. For it to return, it will need to eat, but what they feed it must be specific. It will come back. With that, he asks if they are ready to begin, and the group looks at the old man puzzled. He reaches in the sack that he's been carrying and proceeds to pull out bottles of wine, liquor, snacks, soup, a sheet, and glasses. There in the alley, they had a banquet and began to drink. Orourane tells them to think of pleasant things, happy things, spend time enjoying themselves, and before long, the creature would return, but different, something like the form of a puppy. The Baron announces, lifting his glass high, To all troublesome things, away with you. And they toast. The manga youth thinks on all of his troubles of the past year, but not in a negative light, in the way that they brought him here, and that is a joy in itself. Orourane begins to play Mileto the cat, and the group joins in and begins to sing. As this goes on, everyone is wrapped up in the moment until Yukino points out that the creature is here. But, sure enough, a little puppy has appeared at the end of the alleyway, watching and listening. Of course, they all see a different breed of dog, but it is there. Manga youth calls out to it, as does everyone else, and Orourane continues to play Mileto. As the dog approaches, the manga youth extends his hand, and the puppy gives it a lick, but then it vanishes, slipping into him. A cold serpent coils around his heart. His mood sinks, as though all of this cheer has been a lie. The manga youth begins to cry, and while everyone else continues to sing, Yukino alone asks what's wrong. But then, with that, and seeing the smile of the old man, his heart is filled with warmth, and he returns to himself. Orourane tells him that tomorrow, all he needs to do is hold his hand up to the sun, and it will be done. Deep into the night, the group continues to sing and drink in that alleyway. Baku. A young man has been plagued with terrible dreams. In one, he strangles a man, pouring all of his strength into it, and all the while, the man smiles at him, even as his fingers sink into the throat of the man, squelching and gripping warm, pulpy masses within. The man continues to smile, and he will not die. His hands may flail and flutter about, but he continues to smile. In others, he chases down a woman and violates her. She'll cry for forgiveness. She'll say she's sorry. And each time, a thrill washes over him, and his desire for violence grows. He will fold and twist her body, knotting it, kneading her limbs, overlapping them until her form is nothing but a lump of flesh. But within that mass, her face remains visible, staring into him and crying. Sometimes, he cries too. In other dreams, where these people are normally victims, they will suddenly turn and attack. They take to the chase as he flees, and then a beast covered in black fur also begins to chase him. It doesn't matter if he flees into his bathroom, the attic, a classroom, it will find and devour him. The classroom is an interesting one because no one else notices him being attacked. However, there's one simple rule to follow. Don't acknowledge it. No matter how close it gets, do not acknowledge that it is there. Unfortunately, he cannot endure the gaze of the beast. It will get up to him, close, face to face, staring directly at him as though asking, "Is it you?" And he will take off running. Nowadays, whenever this young man sleeps, it's always these dreams. Now, he's been calling them the man and the woman, but he does know who they are, and trying to obscure this fact will do him no good. From dream to dream, the faces may shift, clothing and voices may differ, but he knows who they are. They're former classmates, the man named Ichikawa and the woman named Imiko. Before graduation, he knew them, and he knew that Ichikawa liked Imiko, but she was his. However, the young man failed his entrance exams and has been a Ronin for the past year. In modern Japanese slang, Ronin is a term for a student who has failed their university entrance exams and spends their time studying to retake. Ichikawa and Imiko did not fail their exams and moved off to Tokyo that spring while the young man was essentially held back. Since then, the two have become a couple. Around May, Imiko and the young man had been exchanging letters and phone calls, but after June, the calls stopped coming. And then, they stopped coming from Ichikawa as well. Another friend who lived in the area informed the young man that Ichikawa and Imiko had been out drinking together, and they were frequently seen together elsewhere as well. As summer break came, students returned home, and the young man found himself going to the bookstore. And before reaching it, he saw Ichikawa and Maiko walking arm in arm. He and Maiko awkwardly greeted each other, but it was the words from Ichikawa and the way he said them that impacted him the most. "Well, that's how it is, you see," said with a sneering grin. It wasn't to the young man or to Maiko, but to both at once. The young man spent an hour in the bookstore, unable to choose anything, not wanting to leave. It was after this that his dreams began. Even after August, when students returned, the dreams continued. They even escalated. It began to take a toll on the mental health of the young man, and in turn his physical health as well, to the point where others began to notice. That sneering grin and those words would not leave. He could no longer study, and all the knowledge he worked to obtain seemed to just vanish. It was on a walk one day that he saw him, what appeared to be a thin, out-of-season Santa Claus, and of course, from within his coat, 3 small cats. But there was something else. Circling excitedly around the old man's feet was something strange. At first it looked like a puppy, but on closer look, that wasn't right. It's almost like a short, tiny, snouted elephant, or maybe a long-snouted pig covered in dense, short fur like a boar. But as it moved, the fur shimmered in rainbow hues. So transfixed was the young man that he didn't even notice the old man approach, who simply asked if he could see it. He didn't have time to answer, though, as one of the cats, Illuminato, hopped from his coat and ran into the nearby liquor store with the old man chasing after. That night, or maybe it was the night after, he doesn't know, he saw that same strange creature in his dreams. As usual, it was a dreadful dream, one in which he was smashing Ishikawa's face with a rock. But as usual, he also couldn't kill him. The face would just taunt him with nya nya like a child, and that he would smash it, and it would reform like rubber, and the cycle continued. But then, without warning, that strange creature showed up and devoured Ichikawa's head. The creature looked at the young man with gentle eyes and gave a simple, solitary, gentle sound. That next night, it was the same usual dream with Maiko, and as before, the creature showed up, but with her, it devoured all of her. Each time he dreamed one of those awful dreams, the creature would show up and devour it, even against the black-furred creature that chased and attacked him. And so, he finally began to sleep well, but the creature continued to show, and as it did, it continued to grow. One night, the young man relays this to a friend who immediately tells him that it's a Baku. When he questions this, he simply responds that it's a mythical being that eats dreams. It specializes in nightmares. It's really a creation of his own mind, though. He was being so worn down that his subconscious tried to balance it out. The young man believes he may have read about this somewhere, and the friend tells him of course he did, and his unconscious retained that information and then used it. Conversation soon drifted elsewhere, but one thing the young man can't shake is, how did he see it around the feet of the old man? And how did the old man know it was there too? One morning, the young man awakes with a startle. The Baku is on his pillow next to him. His startled cry brings his mother into the room, but she doesn't see anything, so he plays it off as though the vacuum cleaner woke him up. When he tries to touch the creature, his fingers slip right through it. And from then on, he awakes to the creature sleeping somewhere in his room every morning. Testing the boundaries, he invites his friends over, but they never remark on seeing it, and he watches them walk right through it. He obviously questions if he's just beginning to lose his mind, but soon things begin to get bad again. Though he can sleep, his emotions begin to dull and feel far away, and this is noticed by those around him as well. There's no energy to the young man of any kind. Slowly as well, the Baku begins to change. It becomes less sweet and adorable and begins to glare at him. The rainbow shimmer and hue is gone from its fur, and sometimes it bears fangs at him. Its face has changed. Should he dream darker dreams? Is that what it wants? That unfortunately may be impossible, as he no longer dreams at all. Well, not really. Whenever he dreams, it's just the Baku, glaring at him, almost as though starved. One morning, there's a new development. He can touch the Baku, but it doesn't like this, and it snaps at him. And not much longer after that, one night the Baku lunges at him in his dream and sinks its fangs into his leg. Awoken by this, he finds a very real wound on his leg, and the Baku glaring at him, not asleep. Slowly, he moves to the door, and it follows. He closes the door, and the creature passes right through. There is no barrier that can keep it from him, and now it can hurt him. He takes off running into the night, and the Baku pursues. As though tethered to him, he cannot gain any distance, so he just keeps running. 1 hour, 2 hours. He finally screams for help from a drunk, but the man doesn't understand. He yells at a bicyclist, but the man doesn't see anything, though he does see the wound on the young man's leg. So he just runs more until he finally reaches a park on the edge of town. Sleep begins to press in on him, and he can't resist it. Before he knows it, he's looking up at the sky, but he's not standing. The Baku advances on him, and his eyes begin to close. And then he hears a melody somewhere, a sound that keeps him awake, and from behind the Baku approaches the old, slender man holding those 3 cats, stroking their bodies, and in doing so, creating the sound that he is hearing. Orourane comes to a stop next to the young man and exclaims, "That was a close one, but he was just in time." He reaches out to the Baku and tells it that eating nothing but bad dreams will twist up its face like that. The Baku growls at him, but he continues, asking the Baku if it met the young man in town and saw that he had many tasty things. The young man had a lot going on in his heart, and that was enough that he could see it. The old man strokes and holds the Baku, and it begins to shrink. He gently explains to the creature that he let himself get distracted by Illuminato, and when he did, he lost track of this one. Eventually, he sets it back down, and back in its original adorable form, it begins to wind around his legs again. He then looks at the young man and explains that what became of the Baku came from the young man's heart, and Orourane needs to return that to him. So, he reaches his hand towards the young man, and in it is something like a soft, glowing blue sphere. With an easy motion, it rolls right into the young man's chest and soaks into him. Orourane explains that the unpleasant things and the joyful things make a single whole. You can't choose one nor cast the other away. You must have the courage to accept both, together. And with those words, all of the terrible, aching, painful, resentful, sorrowful things fill the young man back up. But then something else. Joy. A restless, stirring wonder as well. Pain. Now that was familiar, but he understood that it someday would become the soil for joy to grow in. And with that, he begins to cry, and Orourane takes his leave. The young man raises to his feet and remains standing there, listening to the trees until the first light of morning falls upon that place.